Hey folks, it's Rod with Power Group. Welcome back on The Pursuit of Wealth. Today is Tuesday. It's August 27th, 2024. And with me today is Sheldon Inwentash, the founder and chairman, also is the CEO of ThreeDCapital. They're a Canadian-based venture capital firm. They trade on the CSE under ticker symbol IDK and IDKFF on the OTC. Welcome, Sheldon. Thanks for joining the show today. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Rod.
My pleasure. Looking forward to it. I don't really need to even give you an introduction, but just kind of for the people that haven't been following you, maybe if you could just give a little bit of a background. I know you had met Warren Buffett. You were offered to be a shark on Shark Tank. You took your previous venture 150x in growth. Maybe just before we get into the company, if you could share a little bit about your background and your professional career.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. Goes back a long time. I started just on a designation basis. I got my CPA at Price Waterhouse, and because I was on the Imperial Oil audit, I was able to get a job in industry. I really never wanted to practice accounting as an oil and gas analyst. And then I began and built in the 1980s a number of oil and gas companies that were, the last one, was over $12 billion company. Then I proceeded to sort of go out on my own, if you will, and I started a company called ThreeDCapital. Pine Tree, many people would have known. Probably started it in 92, took over a shell at 10 cents, and ultimately I exited at $26. We had many exits over $1 billion. I started companies also in the biotech space, companies like Visible Genetics, which was a high-speed DNA sequencing, but eventually used to manage disease, and took it public at $2. It went up to 120 on NASDAQ. I sold the company to Bear, and then proceeded to just start building other companies. I've raised over $30 billion for the companies I've been involved in. So when I get behind a project, I, typically management, capital, structure, and so forth. So I do it all. I kind of sort of retired, and then my son wanted to get into the business. And, frankly, I love this more than anything. I have the passion for it. I like to build things. My philosophy is I really like to look where the world's going, and then I try to fit companies into that vision. And whether it's a cycle in mining, I've had a lot of success in mining on top of oil and gas, but I've also had a lot of success in tech and biotech. And so I've ostensibly been stealth for the last 7 years because I didn't want to come out and start talking about all the things I'm working on that I'm going to take the world over. Arm waving, because we all know that timing is something that is very, very difficult to predict because things happen. So we have a confluence, we have 70 companies, and many of them are commercializing this year. And we think we have two companies that are going to be trillion-dollar companies, one in micropayments and one in the Internet of AI. So we've been involved in AI now for 6, 7 years. So we're not just showing up and going, hey, look at, we got an AI thing. No, not at all. We have AI for smart cities. We have AI, which is going to be in medical tech. We're commercializing all these projects. And so when we come out with news, it's basically execution. And that is the key thing that is important for a company like ours. And basically the value proposition for investors is, how do you get involved in companies at the get-go? How do you participate in a company that actually gets seed capital shares and invests at that level? So what we do is we not only invest in that level, but we also add value in a very substantial way through advisory and so forth. So we help build these companies. So we really understand we're not throwing darts against the wall and going, we're stock pickers and so forth. No, we take strategic positions. We're often the largest shareholder in that particular company. And I can go through some use cases here, perhaps after my introduction, of areas that, perhaps some of your viewers may or may not even know that it was possible to invest in. So you get basically exposure to a diverse group of companies in different industries, and the cost base is at the start. So our objective is to make 50 to 100 times our investment in any one of these. And as an investor, you get exposure to that. So we have found that a lot of people are very interested in getting that exposure because they could not really get it themselves on their own.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And thank you for sharing that. It resonates with me very, very much, because whenever I'm looking at, these different types of investments, whether it be, cannabis or whether it be blockchain, crypto, I always say I'm not here for taco gains, right? I'm here for those 100x opportunities and that life-changing wealth. And there's so many disruptive technologies. And I like the comparison that you have on the website. It's an ETF for ground floor opportunities. And there's even been some comparisons to, say, like an ARK Invest. So, kind of like a Canadian ARK, if you will. But just maybe if you could just briefly tell our audience about ThreeDCapital. What is some of the, what is the mission, and what was like, why did you start this venture?
Yeah, so I basically like to build companies. I like diversity. I don't like all my eggs in one basket. For example, people that want to invest in mining, well, there's been a bear market for 10 years. So while that is happening, I want to have my fingers in other pies. And you don't always know when they're really going to engage and become something. But our philosophy, is to invest in a few verticals. AI. I still do traditional mining. Um, Biotech, we have one medical cannabis company and three longevity companies in the Bay Area in California. We have a cybersecurity company, and we have a lot of digital asset exposure as well. Not like buying cryptocurrency, but companies that use the blockchain to enable their business, for improved supply chain and so forth. So we've got about four key verticals, and they're all part of what I consider the future world that we're in, and that we're going to be in, and that is really our philosophy. We look at 1,000 projects to pick one. Like I say, we have approximately 70, and we have a YouTube channel that I just set up this year, so
Mm-hmm.
that don't shoot me or don't listen just me. I'm the messenger. Listen to the founders and owners and CEOs of these individual companies. And in some cases they're public, so you can go down that rabbit hole and look at how they're doing. You may want to invest in them. That's certainly up to you. So we need a mix of public and private investments, so there are liquidity options for us, to continue investing.
Gotcha. No, that's awesome. Yeah, like pretty much all of the areas that you cover have really spoken to me. They pique my interest. Obviously the channel's a MJ focused channel, so we'll get to that. We'll discuss the MJ or the biotech aspect, because I know a lot of my viewers will like that. But yeah, everything from crypto to artificial intelligence, like these are highly disruptive industries, and I'm here to kind of make a dent in the universe, so to speak. So definitely. I relate to those areas, and that's pretty much the foundation of my channel. And I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time today. Was there something that spoke to you about our channel as well? Was there anything that you can kind of say that excited you whenever you saw the opportunity to meet with me today?
Yeah, I just think I like the philosophy of, like you say, getting involved early, making a difference uh, in people's lives, financially and otherwise. And I thought there was a nice fit, not knowing you're Canadian and in Edmonton, and I'm in Toronto, but I
Yeah,
speak to people from all over the world.
absolutely. Yeah, and one thing I noticed, one of your comments was, we're basically in the fourth industrial revolution, right? And with the speed of technology and, innovation, it's really hard to fathom where we're going to be, and even, 5-10 years from now with the help of AI, so all these, we're starting to see disrupt pretty much every sector of the economy. And, we're going to see, couple that with biotech and different sort of medical avenues. I think, we're going to see some crazy breakthroughs with regards to, scientific research and things like that with the help of AI. So looking forward to that. But
100%.
yeah, maybe if you could just touch on ThreeDCapital's success to date and track record?
Sure. So, anybody who's involved in microcaps recognize that, there's been a pretty bad bear market here for a number of years in the space for many, many reasons. And we've held our own. Our value has not gone down. So what it tells you is that, in the last 5 years, we just did one small financing. We've done no financings. We bought back 20% of our outstanding shares. We
Oh,
pay
wow.
for our overheads, and we're continuing that buyback every day, by the way. And in addition, we've had money to invest in new projects. So, we've established to people that, the value has not evaporated in the company. Sometimes people, just blow it. So we've had wins, we've had setbacks, which, is part of this business. So, we feel right now we're poised for parabolic growth. And again, I'm only talking on channels like this because I believe it. I don't want to set myself up or your audience for disappointment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity and just coming on and, this isn't sponsored in any way. It's just basically a generic conversation. And you guys reached out to me and, I was definitely blown away with what you're doing, and your track record speaks for itself. So when you're looking at these different sectors and areas of interest and companies, investments, what are some of the absolute no-go or go factors when you're kind of qualifying that investment? Is there something that is is it a management team? Is there something that, you have like a criteria, checks all the check boxes? Maybe if you could touch on that.
Yeah, so every situation, every industry is kind of different. So it's not one rule above all, but people are obviously the most important, because great people do great things. Bad people turn great things into nothing. So people, and that's still a wild card. You never know, but I think it's a very important part of the equation. The vision, where it's going to go, very important. Does it fit into our model of where we think the world's going? And what is our entry point? We're very valuation conscious, so we like to get involved in very low market caps. So if it's too high, even though we think the opportunities are great, we'll figure that out in the algorithm, and it would have to be an exceptional situation for us to break that type of rule. So it has to fit into our vision. It has to be a great team, and the capital structure has to be good. And the team has to be somebody who we can work with, who will listen. Because, like I said, I've raised $30 billion for my own companies. I've got lots of scars on my back. I want to impart the knowledge of previous wins and losses, and I want to work with people almost as an extension of the company to help them get where they want to go.
Right. Like a vested interest, right? You're not just pouring in capital and then walking away and
Yeah.
watching,
Yeah,
very,
in our office in Toronto, I run basically an accelerator. We've got a number of companies in the office, and what's great is I've been able to do strategic partnerships amongst those companies to help them scale their business and reduce the time to market issues, and that's been really good. So we've got a very vibrant working environment.
awesome. And then you touched on management team there briefly. Do you meet with the management team of every company? Do you do that like over the internet, like the Zoom, or do you go in person and meet them?
Everybody in person.
Everybody in person.
Yeah, and we have a project in Taiwan. We've met with them many times. We're partners with SoftBank. We're partners with almost every major bank and insurance company in Asia through
Mhm.
this particular company. So we'll travel to them. They travel to us. We meet in the mid zone at conferences and so forth. But we are constantly in contact with our investee companies.
Gotcha. And what I just thought of this, do you have any, like, is it on your radar for electric vehicles, the EV space? Is that something that you're actively monitoring or considering? Do you have any investments touching that? I saw there's China tariffs by the Canadian government, I think 100% on that.
Yeah, yeah.
They're talking about maybe retaliating there, but yeah, what's your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
so they're basically following the U.S. So I'll give two comments on that, maybe more than two. There is something that I cannot talk about, but I think within 60 days I will be able to do it. And it's an extremely interesting, unique situation that ties to that industry. So, right now we're not there. What we're involved in is companies that are supplying the key materials to develop the batteries, nickel, copper, cobalt. We have a major company that's going to be a source of supply for that particular industry. Where we stumbled on something that I didn't realize up until 6 months ago is we've looked at a lot in the hydrogen space. Hydrogen will be the holy grail because there's a
Mhm.
zero CO2 footprint. And hydrogen is extremely expensive to synthesize and to make. So we have looked at a tremendous number of companies, and it gets into be a science project. It's very deep in terms of you know, synthesis, electrolysis, everything that's necessary into making these various forms of hydrogen. Every country, every province, everybody's giving incentives to create infrastructure around hydrogen because without question, it is a much better solution than electric vehicles for many, many reasons. So I have a big background, as I mentioned before, in oil and gas, and the
Mhm.
situation came to our attention
Right.
a few months ago, and we made an investment because we really liked the prospects, but it was not in any way confirming to what we thought. So natural hydrogen can now be found in reservoirs like you find natural gas,
Mhm.
like you find helium, like you find oil and gas. Well, one of the most prone areas for hydrogen, again, I've read all the white papers, all the technical reports, is northern Quebec.
Mm.
And Quebec, many years ago, had a massive bull market and craze into what they called shale gas. But the government stopped it. Companies went from 40 cents to $40 because there's a lot of gas there. But Quebec is extremely green in terms of everything they do, and they
Yeah.
did not want to allow fracking. So that industry stopped. But I had a lot of experience looking at those projects. So we got involved in a company that's called Quebec Innovative Materials. Okay. It's a public company, QIMC. So we financed the company at 3 cents because of prospectivity, reading the reports on all their land in northern Quebec for the discovery of natural hydrogen in the ground. So they started doing work about a month ago, and they get these indicators that come to surface because hydrogen seeps to surface and you can measure it. They discovered some of the best readings ever. And the scientific team, which are all part of INRS, which is the government agency in Quebec,
Mhm.
and Quebec academic institutions in Quebec City. And they said, no, we think there's a high probability we're going to find something here. So the initial results were so good, and the shares moved up to 20 cents. So we invested at 3 cents in a life offering. We're the largest shareholder. We got a warrant. And suddenly they're coming out with these numbers that people are going, whoa. And we own all the land that is prone to this. So if we connect the dots here, and this company can continue to demonstrate that there's a chance of a commercial hydrogen reserve, hydrogen, unlike natural gas, when you take the natural gas out, you deplete the reservoir. Hydrogen is not. It keeps
Replenishes?
reproducing
Oh,
hydrogen
cool.
on its own naturally.
Huh.
So if these dots get connected, tiger by the tail, this will be the supplier to the car market, industrial market. Right now, hydrogen selling in BC for $14.50 a kilogram. That's an extremely uh, robust number if we find what we think we're going to find. So there's a company that, again, most people would have never stumbled on this. I have a background in hydrocarbons, so I kind of connected dots.
Mhm.
But, that could be a moonshot for us. So I encourage everybody to follow this company because it's very unique. The Gates Foundation's put millions into looking for natural hydrogen. Everybody wants to find natural hydrogen now because it would be the holy grail.
Interesting. I'm definitely gonna add that to my radar for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been kind of on the sidelines with electric vehicle companies at the moment. I just think it's a little early, and not really 100% sure how the infrastructure is going to be supported and rolled out. So I'm kind of like you, just looking at the the raw materials and things like that that are needed.
Well, the blocking position in the EV industry, and I've spoken to all the major car companies because of the companies that we're involved in.
Hmm.
And for example, GM wants to produce 1 million cars in 2026. There's not enough cobalt, copper, nickel for them to make the batteries.
To support
So
that.
they can do the Inflation Reduction Acts, and you could do this and do that and say, we're going to give incentives for everybody to buy EVs. But guess what? There's not enough metal in the system to build them all. So that is a problem. And that is coming to roost right now.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, let's keep tabs on that. That's definitely going to be an interesting segment as well. In terms of the financials for the company, I took a quick look at them, and I was impressed by the quarter that ended March 31st, 2024. Company had positive net income of 3.7 million, or 0.07 per share, compared to a loss of 1.9 million the same quarter a year prior. Can you give just an explanation on what was the driving factor behind this jump?
Yeah, so a couple things. We settled a lawsuit that was outstanding. Um, so what we do, and the thing to really focus on, uh, and I'm a CPA saying this, is not so much the financials. What we've done in terms of transparency for all investors is, rather than wait for financials to come out every 3 months, we report a monthly NAV, net asset value. And that is really the number to follow, because really on every month or quarter, timing issues, you could have variability and volatility in numbers. So we report mark to market every month, what our net asset value is, and that's probably the best way to monitor the progress of ThreeD.
Okay, gotcha. And yeah, it's trading at what I think a 50% discount to NAV at the moment, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And the market cap sitting at just 14.7 million earlier today when I checked. Cash position of 12.3 million. So there definitely seems to be some value here, to your point, especially from an NAV perspective as well. And then, as you mentioned, you're not planning any equity raises, and then you've even implemented a share buyback program that you continue to support, right? So,
yep, you can see that in the insider reports.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And then one thing I noticed, there wasn't a whole lot of institutional ownership. I think it was less than 0.5% in the stock. Is this like a focus for you? Is this a concern for you? Is there any plans to try and increase that?
Yeah, there's no question that that's a market I know very well.
Mm-hmm.
So I know who would be interested in this particular vertical space and so forth. We are getting on a lot of radar screens. And, we have 70 companies. We have companies in there that we believe are going to go parabolic. As those occur, institutions do outreach, and they're interested in those companies, and ultimately they end up buying the parent company. So I'm expecting in the next 6 to 9 months, we are going to get gobbled up by many institutions that are hungry for returns, just like they buy ARK Invest, which is a disruptive investing company, but the companies they invest in are, in the billions. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So they can still be worth maybe trillions, but in many cases, things like DocuSign or Tesla, they've already had their big moves.
Yeah.
So we don't want to compete as though we're a stock market play in the sense of an index, but we believe we have a number of horses running that are going to really pull the whole company with them, and then it's all becomes a momentum play.
Right. Yeah, and I'm looking at the stock here, we're kind of just ranged over this range here from 2020, the lows. I assume that was in C19. So if we look at the low there, off of the low up about over 500%. So definitely, seeing some opportunity there, but we have corrected since the high of that move there at 236, trading at about a 90% discount. which was the high back in February 2021, and which I noticed coincided with the high of the MJ industry. So it kind of reminds me of that, and it might have to do something with the fact that you have that exposure to the biotech. We'll touch on that here next. But do you think that the stock right now? Do you think it's super undervalued? Like, do you think this is justified, or do you think that it's an overreaction at the moment?
Yeah, I think it has to do with the state of the small cap space, and
Hmm.
it's people, unfortunately, in the small cap world are constantly looking for liquidity. So every time something moves up, they just sell it. But I believe we're in the beginning of a bull market. I believe that, for our stock, this is definitely the bottom, and then once momentum starts to build and we have news. And I pretty well post a lot of what's newsworthy. I post it on my social media. We don't come out and put press releases out that this company did this and did that, unless it's uniquely moving our needle.
Yeah.
But we file a CSE bulletin every month, so we give disclosures. So if one really want to go down the rabbit hole, they could really, put all the pieces together to realize when things are starting to change and move.
Hmm.
And I think we're very close to that.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great explanation. And then in terms of areas of interest, like like obviously you cover a lot of different sectors, a lot of different companies. You work with so many different sectors and companies. Which would you say is the most exciting? Which one would you say you're most excited about? And then second to that, which one would you say has the most potential in terms of growth?
Yeah, so all our AI initiatives are looking really good. We have a company that's managing smart cities for sewage and water, and that company is getting contract after contract. We have another company that we invested in 2020 at 30 cents. The shares went to $14. It's a company called Tenet, Tenet. The symbol's PKK, and we were exiting up there, but not because we expected what was going to happen. COVID shut down China, and it was an app that matched borrowers and lenders for loans. And the company went from 30 million to 110 million in revenue, and then whatever broke down. So
Hmm.
that company we've just recently repositioned ourselves in at 10 cents, and they have an extremely proprietary business model. By using all the data that they got from the borrowers and the lenders, we are now going to be launching, or they will be, and creating proprietary indexes that will mirror private company performances on a daily basis in all kinds of sectors with public companies. And we have found that the correlation is such that we can predict earnings now of all the big guys, every public company that we have private company data for.
Hmm.
So this company, we think, is it going back to $14? I don't know, but from 10 cents, I think it's going to go to $1 for sure. And if they actually produce these indexes, which they're about to launch within 90 days, data companies like this get bought out for massive premiums. So these
Yeah.
are the types of things that we like to do, and everything around that data capture in the private companies uses AI.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely think the AI story is going to be massive. I do think that blockchain. I've always said, on the channel that I'm a first and foremost I'm a MJ kind of guy, cannabis, but that's my passion. But at the end of the day, I think the blockchain payments industry is going to be massive. I would say in terms of market cap and just amount of sheer capital that's going to be entering the space. I'd say AI. I'd probably say blockchain and then AI and then it's hard to say. It's a toss up really between the two of those. You're talking about revamping the whole financial system. And then, obviously cannabis is going to be a big business as well. But, we're talking maybe, we might get to 1 trillion or 5 trillion in market cap for the whole industry in terms of cannabis. Whereas, the blockchain and crypto space could reach north of 100 trillion pretty easily. So we're talking about 100x multiple, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So maybe if you just touch on cannabis, because I know, 80 to 90% of the viewers here on the channel, that's basically their focus and my focus as well. We're an MJ-centric channel. Maybe just touch on who's catching your eye and what your investments are in terms of cannabis and biotech.
Sure. So, I'll have to break those separately. So we're
Okay.
involved in biotech science around longevity. We have 3 companies in the Bay Area. We believe 2 of them are going to be the leaders in their field. And based on the discovery of the epigenetic clock, which measures your biological age as opposed to your chronological age, there are now going to be drugs that are going to make your organs think they're younger, and you're going to become more youthful. So this is very real. Breakthroughs are there. In terms of medical cannabis, I only invested in one company, and it's the tortoise and the hare. I invested in a company that basically was not going to just grow stuff and tell you it's great, take it, you're going to do better. I'm a science guy, so everything we did in this particular company, and it's called Avicana,
Right.
everything is evidentiary. So every formulation that they develop in the medical cannabis space has clinical trials and data, so that if you go and you need a product, we're going to tell you why that product works and how it works and what the dosage is and so forth. So we're going to distinguish between that and everyone else who says, oh, there's CBD, don't worry, it's good. Your anxiety will go down, your sleep will go down. No, we have a whole suite of, we just received a patent today on a topical that we did a deal with a company, a very large company. I can't name them, or the company did, that believes it's a better topical than Voltaren. Voltaren is a $5 billion a year
Yeah.
selling
Huge.
topical.
Yeah.
We believe ours, which involves, it has THC and CBD in it, it's a topical, they believe it's much better. So they're going to put a big marketing budget, and we're taking that drug now into 20 countries.
Wow.
We also have others. We have an Epidiolex, which was the only drug approved. We just got approved for a generic version that is 1/30th the cost.
Wow.
In this is in South America. So this company, most people ignored it because they don't understand biotech, they don't understand science. All they cared about is how much you're growing and so forth. So the difference between us and the rest of the industry is our gross margins are between 50 and 60% because all our formulations are proprietary. And I know you're going to be speaking to the founder and CEO on that, and you'll get a flavor of that. Last year, Shoppers Drug Mart decided they were going to exit the online business because they wanted to fulfill prescriptions in their drugstores. And the government said, nope, you got to go through cannabis stores. And they're going, yeah, but we have a pharmacist that can really tell you what your child with epilepsy needs or depression and so forth. So because the government wouldn't give them that, they decided to sell it, and we bought it. And they picked us out of all the companies because we have the strongest relationships with the medical community and all the hospitals. So we have a lot of street cred in that. And we just did a symposium, hundreds of people there, doctors doing presentations, and everyone singles us out and says, you guys have real science behind your projects. So that now we're starting to really explode. There's big pharma around the world that's taking big interest in looking at what we're doing. So I think it's going to become a very big company, and it's protected by its science and through patents and formulations. So that was the one company I invested in. It's taken a long time for it to be noticed, but it's starting to get noticed now.
Very impressive, and it's just not immune to the sector weakness either, right? It doesn't matter if
No.
you're profitable and
Yeah.
not
So
profitable.
we're caught in that, even though we just reported the last quarter, they did, and there was a marginal loss. The previous quarter, we turned a profit. So I think that's pretty good for a small company.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think stock was up at one point. It was over 12% up today in the green, and most MJ stocks were down, 10, 15% today with the news that came out that they're going to be holding an administrative hearing on rescheduling in the US after the elections. So there was a lot of hope that we were going to see that done before the elections. But just I'm excited to do that interview with Ross, the CEO, which you were able to so graciously hook me up with that connection. So I'm looking forward to it. They were actually a company that I'd heard very little about, like you mentioned, but really starting to make some waves in the industry. And I actually did take a small position on the stock, full disclosure. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm always looking at ways to differentiate, right? And they're a very differentiated company. They're not just trying to produce X amount of square footage, or they're not trying to be everything to everybody. And that's kind of what I think the industry needs. Like, we don't need 1,000 licensed producers. We don't need 5,000 multi-state operators in the US, right? We just need maybe scores, a dozen, a couple dozen that really focus on their niche or their specific area of the sector, right, and of the industry. And then it's whether you're into retail, whether you're into gummies and edibles and producing, a lot of these companies are really started to differentiate themselves. And I think having this as a medical play is a great way to diversify your portfolio. So
yeah. And I think there'll be a lot of consolidation in all those other parts of many companies. They took on a lot of debt, and they're trying to swim upstream. It's very, very challenging.
Yeah, and that's ticker symbol AVCN. And the interesting thing too is they're not actually a licensed producer, which was very interesting. So yeah, we'll save some more. We'll save time for that. We'll learn more about that tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll get that interview up in the next day or two. But is there any other MJ companies that catch your eye that's on your radar at the moment?
No, I've kind of been uni-focused, because every time I look at other companies, I realize they don't really have any IP. There's no intellectual property. It's just, yes, they know how to grow. And do I believe that cannabis has a real, need to fill here, or like fills a need? 100%. But other than a brand and something, a cool factor,
Yeah.
I want to know the data. I want to know exactly the bioavailability. I want to know how it helps. I'm into data. So I've looked at hundreds of them, and I'm not alone. And the ones that know a lot more about this industry than me, I'm talking about the pharma side, basically say there's Avicana and there's nobody else. And that's their position. It's been mine, but they looked at more companies than I could look at. So I think if you want to play the general space, there's a lot of good ones out there. That's not what I want. I really want to see high margin, proprietary products, real illnesses being addressed and so forth, not just sort of generic one size fits all. It's good, it'll make you sleep and so forth.
Fair enough. And another anecdotal part here was, I was just wanted to interject there because it reminded me of the whole Shark Tank introduction earlier that I mentioned. Kevin O'Leary, there was an interview not too long ago where he was speaking to some media company, and they said, we heard you have your eyes on an MJ company, and he didn't name the company. I think he said they were out of Vermont. So maybe people can start to connect the dots there, and we can try to figure out which company he's talking about. But I can't remember if they're public or private. But anyways, he said the ROI was super attractive. He was, basically ready to take a position. And then he talked to his lawyer, and his lawyer told him, it's on Schedule 1, dude. Like, are you effing crazy, right? He's like, we can't touch that. So, it just shows how early we are in the space as well, right? Like, there's still all these.
I agree. I think it's early days. Just have to be patient.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like the Warren Buffett quote, right? It's the stock market is a mechanism from transferring wealth from the impatient to the patient. So especially when you're dealing with these high disruptive industries, right? If you look at the tech industry and the .com bubble, right, from 2000, it took like 13 years for some of these companies to get back up to their all-time highs and really see price discovery, right?
Yep.
And they weren't selling Schedule 1 illegal drugs in the US, and Apple almost went bankrupt in 1997 if it wasn't for Microsoft investing 150 million. So that speaks volumes, I think.
You're right about that.
We'll switch over to blockchain. Obviously you're big into the payment space. Maybe if you could just touch on your view on this industry, how this is going to evolve, and maybe one of the companies that you're super excited about in that industry.
No, for sure I'll do that. Again, this is another 7-year journey. We invested in a blockchain-like protocol called TODA. TODA. The first application was a company called TodaQ, run by Hassan Khan, and I spent quite some time with him today. And they built a tech stack that was too early for the market. About 18 months ago, the light bulb went on and they realized their first killer app is in micropayments. People have been trying to develop micropayments for 30 years. 6 billion people of 8 billion people on planet Earth cannot afford a subscription. They can't afford a Netflix, $20 a month. They can't afford to buy the New England Journal of Medicine, all their articles for $100 a month. They can't afford to buy this and that. They're basically consumption-oriented people that go, I'll buy this one show, I'll buy this one song, I'll buy this one article, and so forth. But the problem is these companies can't sell one-offs because the cost of doing a transaction in most cases is more than the revenue you're going to get on a micropayments. This technology has unlimited scalability. Blockchain is not a scalable technology. In other words, for the fintech side of the equation, because of the consensus mechanism, everything needs to go through a process before you can finish the transaction. Toda does not need that. It's basically has a whole different set of footprints. So we can actually do a transaction for a penny and everybody makes money because the cost of that transaction are fractions of a penny. So many, many, many business models are about to get disrupted. And that technology is being launched as we speak. We're doing it with Google. And in Canada, CIBC and RBC are on-ramp and off-ramp partners. And the music industry is really jumping into this, where young artists now can monetize their songs, and they can sell a song for 5 cents. And if they can do it to 1 million people, they're going to make a living. Right now, if you're trying to go to Spotify and you're, Drake, The Weeknd, Taylor Swift, they're sucking 95% of the oxygen out of that room. There's no room for you. We are now allowing these grassroots, as example, music, but it also relates to other forms of media, content. It mentioned journals, data. We basically allow minimum requirement of ease of use. It's called a tap. You tap it. We've gamified it. It's going to affect all industries. So we believe that this is going to make a huge dent on all the existing business models around credit card companies, payment rails, who's selling what data, who gets access to what data. And I encourage people to, again, on our YouTube site, just like I mentioned Avicana, the CEO is interviewed. I mentioned Tenant, the CEO is interviewed. In the same case here, Hassan Khan, the CEO, is interviewed, where you can see how micropayments are going to be created. And we believe that this is going to be the next major fintech payments rail to be used out there. And the company recently got selected by the Canadian government as a top 8 fintech startup. It's not really a startup anymore, but it's pre-revenue. So that was a great endorsement by the Canadian government, who basically sponsor this program every year. So I think TodaQ, after 7 years of creating a very proprietary deep stack of tech, are going to offer solutions to those that previously could not generate any revenue because all the counterparties, the processing costs, the KYC, it costs you 50 cents to $1. So how am I going to charge someone 10 cents? It's a lost business. Not anymore. So we're very, very excited about this company.
That's definitely exciting. I'm going to be looking into that one a lot more. Something that really resonated with me was the payment industry as well, and the need for that. Like, there used to be like a little tip bot that you could put into Twitter, and you could tip a penny,
Right.
you could 5 a dollar, you could do whatever, right? And it's like you say, it's going to touch every sector of the economy, right? It's going to be huge in the music industry, like you mentioned. But if you look at kind of the ethos of and the white paper of Bitcoin, for example, it was set out to become a peer-to-peer transaction system. But it kind of hasn't really fulfilled that mission, right? It's basically now digital gold. It's scarcity. It solves the portability problem that we have with gold, and eventually there's crypto projects that are tokenizing real world assets, and gold is one of them. So there's so much opportunity there, from tokenization to payments. NFTs is another one, right? So there's going to be so many opportunities, but from a payments perspective, this is, if you can change it from a fraction of a penny, right? I think there's like 2 billion people in the world that don't have access to a traditional bank account, right? And then with the help of Starlink, you're going to, these corporations, not only is it going to create financial inclusion, it's also going to create more revenue for these companies, because essentially, there's 2 billion people in the world that are just cut out of the system, right? So with the help of Starlink, everybody's got a smartphone. All you have to do is just download a wallet on your phone, right? And you can be a part of this new financial system. So
It's
I think
interesting you say that. And one of the calls that I had this week with management at TotaQ is Africa. And Africa, we think, is going to be an exploding market for this on many different levels. There's not enough time to get into it right now, but they're more advanced. And also the financial system there is such that 5-10 cents is a lot of money to certain people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, my partner is actually from Africa, West Africa and Sierra Leone. And if we can improve the lives of people as well, right? Like there's so much good for humanity that we can do as a result of this. Yes, the financial and the that aspect is great, and companies are going to become super profitable, and you're going to see some massive opportunities. But just from a standpoint of making people's lives better, it's going to be huge. I'm excited for it. So
I think it's going to be a game changer, and this is a technology that's almost impossible to replicate, and also, according to the banks, and we know this, it's fraud proof because of the containerization of structure of this particular TotaQ layered technology, and fraud is the biggest problems facing banks today worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just had a buddy the other day that said he got his bank account hacked, and it was on the phone for 3 days trying to sort it all out. So yeah, no, I definitely have more questions. Obviously, I want to respect your time today, so maybe we'll plan for another time in the future and we can reconnect. But is there anything that you wanted to just leave the audience with here before we wrap up today, Sheldon?
No, other than I believe we're going to get on a roll. It's going to be evident in all our companies. The YouTube allows people to, they're going to find some gems that they're going to be very excited about that I'm not even talking about today. And I'm happy to have another date with you where perhaps, your viewer base goes, okay, I would have liked this question asked, or, what about this or what about that? And, we're a very transparent company. Like I say, that's why we do NAV monthly. We don't want to hide results, good and bad. So I'm happy to respond to any inquiries that you may have yourself or anybody else.
Absolutely. Well, let's keep in contact, and appreciate your time today. And definitely we'll be following the stock, considering taking a position as well. So when I do so, I'll let my viewers know, but I'll definitely reach out to them as well. If there's any questions from the audience and from the community, we'll circle back at a later date. But once again, thanks again, Sheldon, for your time today.
Thank you, Rod.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you. Take care.
Take care.